Can you tell us a bit about the Virginia Smart Roads facility at the Virginia Tech Transportation Institute?
Yeah, Virginia Tech Transportation Institute is, we've got a fantastic facility there we call the Virginia Smart Roads, which is it's now a little over 5 kilometers. We've got rural roads, we've got motorway scale roads, we've got city streets and things like that we can use. Basically, it's closed to the public, so we can use it and perform testing. Testing that we're doing is all over the map. Automated vehicles, pedestrian visibility, all those sorts of things. And my own work is specifically related to lighting and visibility. So in terms of those kind of capabilities, the main motorway section of the road is got variable lighting on it, from 40, 60, and 80 and 120 meter spacings, and anywhere from 10 meter mounting heights to 15 meter mounting heights. And then every luminaire, every pole, we've got three luminaires on the top of it. So the 3 luminaires we can turn on and off. So I can have a 2700K road 1 minute, and a minute later I've got a 4000K road, or I've got a high pressure sodium 10 minutes later, and those sorts of things. So those capabilities that we've got are fantastic for the kind of visibility testing we do. On our city streets, we've also got portable luminaires that I can put out and move where I need them, and I can put those down on a rural road environment as well. And then, of course, the rural road area is actually built to an old highway standard. So the reason for that is that that's most of the roadway inventory in North America is all these old roads. So we have an old road to do testing on, in particular when we're looking at automated vehicles and visibility and those kinds of things.
What are the key road safety research projects you are currently looking at related to public lighting?
So some of the key projects we're working on right now is actually an interesting one, looking at automated vehicles and the need for lighting from an automated vehicle. So the question would be is, if I've got a vehicle and I'm using a different sensor set like LiDAR or radar or visual cameras, what is the impact of lighting on those kinds of systems? And do we need lighting for those systems? And so that's a fundamental question as we're moving forward towards more and more autonomy in vehicles. Is the infrastructure that we're currently working with still providing what we need for the automated vehicle? And that's really a fundamental project. And the interesting thing about that is basically what we're doing is we're doing a visibility test with human drivers. And then at the same time, in the same vehicle, we've got an automated vehicle system running. And so at the end of the day, we can compare what the human saw versus what the camera saw, or what the automated vehicle saw, and say, okay, did the lighting help or did the lighting hurt? And so we're looking at a variety of lighting characteristics there: bollards, overhead lighting, single luminaire lighting, sort of raised lighting that's specific to a crosswalk, and a variety of different things, and looking at how these automated vehicles work in that environment in comparison to the human driver.
What is color temperature? What impact can it have on humans? And why is dosage so important?
So color temperature is a really odd metric that lighting people use. So what it really is if you take a piece of metal and you heat it up, it will change colors. So we're familiar with that. As you heat up a piece of metal, it goes yellow, and then it goes to orange, and it sort of goes through phases, and then eventually it gets to be really heated up hot. It's a blue flame. And so we've seen it in acetylene torches. When we were in high school, we used Bunsen burners, and you sort of had the blue flame, and the little center core of the flame was hotter than the outside, and it was all color related. So correlated color temperature is how a light source looks as compared to a heated piece of metal. Really bizarre metric. And it's sort of been morphed into this metric that kind of talks about color, and they're trying to say, okay, blue is bad, yellow is good. And there's reasons behind that. So our human body responds to blue light more than it responds to red. Not our eyes. Our eyes actually respond to green light more. But there's a ganglion cell called the intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cell. And what it does is it drives our body clock. And so our sleep cycle, our melatonin cycle, all these things are all linked to this IPGRC. And it basically is highly sensitive to blue. So what they found is that if you're under a lot of blue light, it'll mess up your daily cycle. And so the issue is, as we start putting LEDs and all these different color temperatures out into the environment, the color temperatures that are higher are more blue. And so that we want to avoid those because there's a potential to impact your daily clock. And so people sleeping in areas and things like that, you really need to control those sorts of things. And so basically for the public, we've got these sort of blue lights we're putting out there. We're putting out blue, and that's has the potential to mess with our melatonin and mess with our body cycle, our sleep cycle. One of the things, though, that's interesting about this whole debate is that what really impacts our melatonin cycle is not just blue light or the blue sensitivity, it's the amount of light we're experiencing. And so the studies that have sort of looked at this thing have been laboratory studies where they're using a lot of blue light. And we find an impact. So we did a study on our road and we looked at what the overall impact was, and we didn't find an impact on melatonin, at least not on salivary melatonin, which is interesting because that means that we're adding blue, but we're not adding enough of it. And so if we get into, and we actually, as part of that study, we started looking at lighting in your bedroom as compared to lighting you're experiencing. I'm sitting in front of a laptop right now, and I'm getting blue light from that laptop. And so what we're finding is the impact of things that you're doing in your own home, watching television, using your laptop, looking at your phone at night, have by far more of a significant impact than what we're dealing with in roadway lighting. So you've got these things. Look at your phone, you can turn on the blue light, you can turn on the night light, it'll make your phone yellow. That'll knock the blue out of it, and that's better for you because you're not experiencing that impact of that blue light on your melatonin cycle.
What is spectral distribution and how does this differ from color temperature?
So as I sort of mentioned, CCT, or correlated color temperature, is a really weird metric, and it's based on the spectrum of the light source. Now the spectrum is the wavelength by wavelength output of a light source. So I got talking about blue light. Well, if you go back to high school, we learned about Roy-Jabiv, red, orange, yellow, green, indigo, blue, violet. I think that's the order of it. And you look at a rainbow. So every light source kicks out light enough to make a rainbow. So if you've got a white light source, it's made up little bits of all these different colored light sources. So that's the spectrum. The spectral output is that wavelength by wavelength little bits of light that make up the overall light experience. So if you've got a light that looks blue, it means it's got a lot of blue and not a lot of red. So the balance is, if you've got a light source that's red, it's the opposite. You've got red with not a lot of blue, and then a green, of course, is in the middle. So if you want to think about spectrum, think about a rainbow. And every light source is made up of a rainbow. And basically, all those rainbows add together to make white light, and that's to make the light that we experience. And so that's spectrum. And how the light source looks is CCT. That's the correlated color temperature. So the interesting thing about correlated color temperature is there's many, many, many different ways of getting to the same correlated color temperature from a spectral output. So you can have a wide variety of spectrum that lead to the same correlated color temperature. So those are the difference between those two.
Can you explain the concept of target visibility and how this relates to road safety?
So target visibility is a metric we talk about all the time, particularly in my research. what it is it's your ability to see an object in the roadway. So I don't see them very often anymore, but we used to always talk about a lost muffler, a muffler lying in the middle of the road, and you need to be able to see that to avoid it, or a concrete block or a cinder block or that fell off the back of a truck that was lying in the road, and you need to be able to see it. I've driven thousands and thousands and thousands of miles, and I don't know I've seen a lost muffler or a concrete block in the road, but I'm sure it happens. But basically, those are objects that you need to see. And so when we're looking at our research, we created a standard target. We call it the target. It's about 18 centimeters on a side. It's got a little tab that sticks out, a 7 centimeters tab that sticks out the side. And the reason for that is that's about the minimum you need to be able to see. Anything smaller, you can probably drive over in your car and not worry about it. Certainly if you've got a sport utility vehicle or a higher vehicle, you can. And so what we look at is then that's our minimum detail. And so as we're doing research, we're always looking for is how easy can I see the minimum detail? And if you can see the minimum detail, then you can certainly see bigger things. You can see pedestrians and things like that. So if we can increase the distance at which you can see the minimum detail, then we give you more time to react. And so if you're driving, we give you more time to react and brake and turn and swerve and all those things you need to do in order to drive safely. So it gives you a much longer decision time to increase your potential safety.
Widely regarded work that you and Nancy Clanton did showed that target visibility on a major road were maximized at about 4,000 Kelvin. Does this work still remain valid?
So color temperature, correlated color temperature, what we find is that and this has been validated in about 6 studies now, is that we get this maximum impact at a 4,000 K. And the reason we believe that is that 4,000 K is kind of, it's pure white. It's not too blue. It's not too red. And so what we get is a balance between red and blue. And the reason why the balance is important is that we believe it's related to color contrast. Now, contrast is the difference between an object and its background. So back when we were talking about targets, it's how different that target is from the road. So if I've got a muffler in the road, it's how easily I can see it against the pavement. Color contrast is specific to colors. So it's the ability to see red against green, or blue against green, or blue against red. And so when we've done studies that look at the impact of correlated color temperature on visibility, if we use only a gray object, we don't get the effect. If we use colored objects, we get the effect that 4,000 K seems to be this maximum value. And so where that comes in is we really believe it's related to the color balance between the spectral balance between red and blue. And so these are the things. What we find is that 4,000 K has probably more of an impact on flora and fauna and the natural environment than the lower correlated color temperatures like 3,000, 2,700. And so those are probably more conducive to sort of a natural environment and more pleasing to the human as well. And so what we're looking at now is we get this benefit of 4,000 for visibility, and we get a potential impact on flora and fauna. And so what we're saying is, okay, use 4,000 K in critical areas and use 3,000 K in other areas. So when I'm talking about a critical area, it'd be a downtown core, for example. Lots of pedestrians, lots of driveways, motorway, people coming into the motorway and things like that. So those are sort of the vision critical aspects. We're saying sort of use a 4,000 K there. And then in residential areas and some more of the suburban type areas, you can probably use a 3,000 K.
Some parties have advocated for 3,000 Kelvin and even lower color temperatures to be adopted widely. What does the science tell us about the impact of this on road safety?
Our research has really looked at a variety of color temperatures. We've looked at 2,200. We've looked at high pressure sodium, which is in around 2,100. We've looked at a 2,200 LED. We've looked at a 3,000, a 4,000, 3,500, 6,500, and 5,000. So that's that whole range. We've looked at a whole range of different colors. And again, our studies really show that 4,000 pops out. And the interesting thing is that 2,200, the bottom falls out. It really has 2,200 really lags behind in visibility as compared to a 4,000. And so as such, we really don't recommend going that low. There are people who argue that 2,700 is okay. We sort of say, okay, stay at 3,000 for areas that are generally lit. Again, residential areas, city streets, and then jump to 4,000 in visibility critical areas. So those would be your industrial areas, commercial areas, and then a downtown core. I would certainly put it 4,000.
Does the optimal color temperature change in rainy or foggy conditions?
So what we find in rain and fog is we did a study at our road. We can manufacture rain and fog at our test facility, and we really found no impact of color temperature. The reason being is that sort of the overall impact of rain, the overall impact of fog was so significant that it wasn't making a major impact on the variation between light sources was so small. It didn't really have a major impact. The reason for that is actually more about physics than anything else. So rain and fog are very, very large particles as compared to the spectrum. So remember, we're talking about nanometers in terms of wavelength. So all these little chunks of light are in nanometers. And rain and fog are rain is certainly in the millimeter range, and fog is in the micrometer range or smaller. But it's very, very small. It's very large particles as compared to the wavelength of light. And so that is a scattering function called me-scattering, M-I-E. So me-scattering. And me-scattering is not spectrally selective. So if you send a white light into the fog, it will penetrate the same as if you send an amber light. That's just kind of the physics of it. There's variation of that, and we could have a long discussion about that, but in general, that's kind of the physics of it. People say, oh, well, blue light scatters more, and that's atmospheric scattering. That's a completely different scattering function. And so what we're expecting is that actually there is really no color temperature impact on weather. And that's a study that we did and kind of showed that once you're impacted by the weather, any potential gain was so small it didn't really have a major impact.
Can you describe what a safe dimming regime between lighting categories might be when deploying smart street lighting controls?
So what we refer to as adaptive lighting is basically dimming the light source based on the road conditions. And so we did a study as long ago as 2014, 2012, somewhere in there. We looked at it and looked at basically 83,000 crashes and about 2,000 lane miles of road, so 3,200 kilometers. And we actually went out and physically measured those 3,200 kilometers with our measurement vehicle. We've got a vehicle with light meters all over it and things. And so we drove all that distance and then looked at 83,000 crashes. And in that, we were able to sort of establish a link between light level and crash rate. So we looked at the night to day crash rate ratio again. So that's number of vehicle miles during the day in relationship to number of crashes and number of vehicle miles at night, and took those in a ratio. And so what we were able to establish is that once you sort of add lighting, there's a point where adding more lighting doesn't work. You kind of plateau, the effect plateaus. And so adaptive lighting kind of runs on that plateau and sort of says, okay, if we don't have as many pedestrians, in particular pedestrians, if we don't have as many pedestrians, we don't have as many vehicles, we can dim down and because there's not less potential for crashes. And so we've taken that and put in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we put in a 7-kilometer stretch of highway that dims at various times of the day based on traffic volumes. And we looked at what we would refer to as a park and ride, a parking area that used for commuters, and we put that in and also dimmed it at certain times of the day based on number of users, number of vehicles in the lot. And really did some surveys, looked at safety, security, and then we also looked at crashes on the motorway, and found really no impact of us dimming the lighting down. There was kind of no impact at all, and of dimming the lighting. So for us, we use an algorithm basically establishes the road usage and just jump the road classes as needed. And there's only a few of the factors that jump the road class, in particular presence of pedestrians and the number of vehicles. So we've found that we can dim it. That's the cycle. We're just changing the motor class. One of the research topics that we're looking at now is whether we can actually change that, and if we've got sort of a impact of traffic volume, and then we have so much traffic, so we get into gridlock. Do we need the lighting when we're in gridlock? Because if the car in front of you doesn't hit something, then you're not going to hit something. So that's the kind of the theory. So we're actually starting to look at whether we can actually dim when there's a high amount of traffic as well. And but right now we dim time of day unless we've got road sensors. If we've got road sensors that we're capable of pulling back, we'll dim based on live traffic volume and those things. And our studies have shown that we're really not seeing an impact on crash rate or really safety and security with a roadway dimming. It's more about public perception.